Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover and I'm back with another video. Today's part 4 of my series where I break down my top 10 players at each position. And today's video is going to be about my top 10 shooting guards. Quick disclaimer, disregard the clothes in the background. I'm currently packing for college, so everything is kind of hectic right now. But I'm going to get out this shooting guard video and hopefully my point guard video pretty soon. But without any further ado, let's get straight into the video. Before we get into my top 10, as usual, I have 3 honorable mentions that I would like to talk about. First up, I have Marcus Smart, the shooting guard for the Boston Celtics, who averaged 13 points, 3 rebounds, and 5 assists this previous season. Marcus Smart defensively, there's not much that needs to be stated. Even though he did take a slight step back this previous season, it's the heart and soul of that Boston team, and he's their lead defender. Given all the other talented defenders that are on this list, and one of those guys we'll get to later. But Marcus Smart is an awesome on-ball defender, awesome off-ball defender. His heart, his IQ, his hustle on that side of the floor. He makes big-time plays defensively. And even though I did think he took a slight step back this year in terms of his efficiency, in terms of both on and off the ball, and as well as he did gamble a little bit this previous season. He's still a borderline all defensive caliber. He is an all defensive caliber player, even given his woes this previous season on that end of the floor. And then offensively, he's improved vastly as a playmaker. He took over as Boston's pseudo floor general while Kemba Walker was out. He's always been a solid rebounder, given his height and given his not his height. He's right around 6'3", but his overall strength. Marcus Smart is a big dude, and even though he's not an efficient scorer, when he gets hot, he can light up. He can rack up points in bunches, but he is inefficient. So you either get all or nothing with Marcus Smart offensively, and that's the reason why I had him outside of my top 10. But his defensive prowess doesn't really need to be doesn't need to be overstated. Moving on, I have Caris LeVert, the shooting guard for the Indiana Pacers, who averaged 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists this previous year. And Caris LeVert was a pretty sad story last year. He got traded from Brooklyn, which was very good for him. Given that he was a budding star in this league. But then he acquired, I believe it was a tumor. And it was very scary for him. The whole NBA community was kind of wishing him the best, was very scared for him, and he managed to make it back to the court this previous season, and played pretty good with Indiana. And despite these averages, the efficiency wasn't really there for him. He's always been kind of average defensively. Even though he is taller than your average guard, and you can't really attack him defensively, just given his height. You can't just abuse him, but he's never been all that disciplined, or all that great of a defender. But offensively is where his value has always been. And even though the inefficiency was there, right? He didn't shoot well from three, from the free throw, anywhere from from all 3 levels on the court, including the free throw line. He didn't shoot all that great. But I give him the benefit of the doubt just because he came back from a tumor, came into a completely new situation while they were a complete mess, and he still managed to go in there and average 24 rebounds and 5 assists. So next year, I'm expecting Caris LeVert. I could see him taking a jump into the top 10. With a full off season to work on his body. Get whatever's going on with the tumor. Hopefully, it's completely gone. Knock on wood that he doesn't have to deal with that ever again. And in a new situation, and he can get acclimated to that. And I expect his efficiency to rise, along with his stats. But Caris LeVert is definitely a budding star in the making. And then finally, I have Bogdan Bogdanovic, the shooting guard for the Atlanta Hawks, who averaged 16 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists per game this previous season. And Bogdan was the second option for Atlanta this previous season. His floor spacing was extremely valuable, and he took a lot of threes. I believe he took right around 6 or 7 threes per game and hit them at a 43% clip. And some of those came off ball, but a number of those also came on the ball as well. With his self creation ability from behind the arc is super valuable for this Atlanta team. Right, as I stated, he was the second option. Took over Atlanta's offense when Trae Young was off the court or hurt or off in general. And when Trae Young and other guys were on, Bogdan Bogdanovic's spacing was very valuable. So he was the second option on a conference finals team. What else is there to say? Defensively, he's never been a good defender. I'd say he's a slightly below average defender. And the only reason why I have him right around the average range is just because he's 6'6", 220 pounds. So you can't really take advantage of his defensive woes like you can like Isaiah Thomas in the past. You can, Boston Celtics Isaiah Thomas. So Bogdanovich, second option on a conference finals team. The simple reason why I had him outside my top 10 is just because the counting stats offensively, despite the efficiency and whatnot, it's just, the shooting guard position, as you guys are going to see, is just so deep. It's not as top heavy as, other positions like small forward or, point guard, which I'll get to in another video. But, it's just a super deep position. And, Bogdanovich was just not better than the 10 guys that I have above him. So without any further ado, let's get into my top 10. Coming in at number 10, I have Terry Rozier, the shooting guard for the Charlotte Hornets, who averaged 20 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists per game this previous season. Terry Rozier was the number one option for Charlotte for almost the entire season. LaMelo Ball had his moments, Gordon Hayward had his moments when he was healthy, but still Terry Rozier was the constant on this Charlotte Hornets team. Was their starting shooting guard, and was one of the most efficient clutch players in the NBA last season. His numbers and efficiency always spiked in crunch time. We all remember the Charlotte's announcer, yelling all those catchphrases about Terry Rozier. But again, his offensive ability doesn't need to be stated. Again, he was a number one option on a playoff team, right? Keep in mind that before Gordon Hayward and LaMelo Ball went out, Charlotte was, right there in the 4th, 5th seed racing. Terry Rozier is a great offensive player, especially great from behind the arc. I think he can improve as a mid-range shooter, and I think he's a decent finisher, but I think he can get better there as well. But his three-point ability, he took right around 8 threes per game and hit them at a 39% clip. And when you keep in mind that he's not just taking, catch and shoot threes, he's taking, step back threes, contested off the dribble threes, most of them. That's incredible. That to shoot 39% on that difficulty and that volume is insane. And despite I think his mid-range and finishing abilities can get better, I would still consider Terry Rozier a 3-point scorer. And while he's not the best number one option, he definitely did a damn good job for Charlotte this previous season. And as a playmaker, I think he's continued to get better, but I think just being in that number one scoring option, I feel like they were really emphasizing it to him, to get yours. So I think he can be a better playmaker than what he showed, but he was a decent playmaker. I thought he made a couple good reads, but again, he was asked to be the number one scorer, so his mind was really on scoring and not necessarily playmaking, which I do think he has the ability to be. But again, he was a great player for Charlotte this previous season. And on the defensive end, I think he's always been, an average defender. He's not the tallest player, but given his athleticism and his hustle, I think he was a much better defensive player in Boston. But again, I think just with the offensive burden that he's had to carry in Charlotte, I think his defensive focus has kind of taken a step back, which is a shame because I do think Terry Rozier could be a very, very good two-way player in this league. So overall, Terry Rozier, great scorer, great 3-level scorer. Can be a better playmaker and defender. But I expect that to continue to grow as, Gordon Hayward is, knock on wood, healthy, and, LaMelo Ball takes another step in year 2, but he's a great 3-way scorer, for the Charlotte Hornets team. Coming in at number 9, I have CJ McCollum, the shooting guard for the Portland Trail Blazers, who averaged 23 points, 4 rebounds, and nearly 5 assists per game this previous season. CJ McCollum having it at number 9 just shows you how deep this position is. A player who just averaged that, and he's at number 9. But CJ McCollum is an offensive dynamite. Before he got hurt, he broke his foot, I believe, and he missed a good amount of games this previous season. He was averaging right around 27 points, like 4 rebounds and 5 assists, and he was a lock to be an all-star. And what's boosted CJ McCollum's jump this previous season was his efficiency from behind the arc. He's always been amongst the league's best mid-range scorers, and he's always been a good 3-point shooter, but the volume has never really been there. So Portland staff really empowered him to take that next step, as a 3-point scorer. And, he was doing that, on the ball, off the ball. And he took right around 8 threes per game this previous year and hit them at, 39-40% clip, which is, again, incredible. Just like some of the other guys, like Terry Rozier, we just mentioned. But, CJ McCollum is just a better offensive player. I think he just has better vision and better handle, much more natural score. And again, before he got hurt, he was averaging 27, 4, and 5. And, his numbers definitely teetered off, as he rushed back with his foot injury. But still, CJ McCollum is an offensive dynamite. 3-level score. I don't think I need to really highlight his offensive prowess. The reason why I have him at number 9 is just because of his defensive concerns. He's just he's right around 6'3", 190 pounds, so he's very small. Well, he's not really that small height wise, but just given how he's not even, when you look at CJ McCollum, he's not even necessarily, like a thin framed guy, but, just given how much he weighs, he can get bullied defensively, right? Like how I mentioned Bogdanovich, how bad of a defender he is. You can't just, take advantage of him. With CJ McCollum, you really can. And, his fit next to Damian Lillard is very questionable on that end of the floor. So again, CJ McCollum is an offensive dynamite, 3-level scorer, one of the best mid-range and 3-point creators in the NBA. Is an all-star caliber player, but again, he's just such a poor defender that in pick and roll schemes, on isolations, on ball, can't really do much off ball because of how he's not the most athletic player, and he's not the biggest or strongest player, doesn't have the biggest wingspan, so he can't really do much as a help defender. So CJ McCollum is as good of an offensive player he is, he's just as poor of a defender. So I have CJ McCollum coming in at number 9. Coming in at number 8, I have Jaylen Brown, the shooting guard for the Boston Celtics, who averaged 24 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists this previous year. Defensively, Jaylen Brown, not much needs to be stated. I don't think he's, as good as, a Marcus Smart, or really even, necessarily a Jason Tatum at this point in Jason Tatum's career. Jaylen Brown is an awesome on-ball defender. He's an awesome defender in general. He's great in on-ball situations, isolation situations, pick and roll situations. As a help defender, as helping on the weak side of the floor. Overall, he's just a great defender. While I necessarily wouldn't put him on the same tier as Marcus Smart, just the way Marcus Smart just gets after it. I think it's just is just on another level than Jaylen Brown or even their other teammate Jason Tatum. But nonetheless, Jaylen Brown is a borderline all defensive caliber of a defender. And then on the offensive side of the floor, he's always been a great finisher. Around the basket, but his ball creation skills and his handles and his self creation skills have really taken a leap this year, as you can tell by the points total. But when you really dive into the volume of shots that he's taken and the difficulty of shots that he's taken and the efficiency, I feel like I've been saying that for every player so far. Is really great. It's similar to the previous 2 guys that I mentioned. He shot right around 7 threes per game and hit them at a 39% clip, and which is insane. Looking at how Jaylen Brown started his NBA career, always been a great rebounder, and he's an improved mid-range scorer, and he's improved as his career has gone on as a free throw shooter. He entered the league, he was right around 65%, I believe, and now he's made all the way to a 76% free throw shooter, which is very impressive. And despite the 3 assists, that's the reason why I have him low as I do compared to the other guys that I have ahead. Is just because of his playmaking deficiencies. I feel like even though he does average 3 assists per game, he doesn't necessarily make his teammates better. And when you watch the Boston Celtics play, it was really just Jason Tatum isolation, Jaylen Brown isolation. It wasn't a lot of ball movement. It wasn't a lot of creativity. Now, whether that was Brad Stevens, maybe not having control of the locker room, or maybe he was just not all in offensively creative this previous season. You still have to Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum both still have to take some accountability. I think Jaylen Brown, more so than Jason Tatum, was much more of a black hole for Boston and doesn't necessarily make his teammates better, which is the reason why I have him at number 8. And having Jaylen Brown at number 8 is it's pain to me, but that's just how deep and good this shooting guard position is. Coming in at number 7, I have Shea GilAlexander, the shooting guard for the Oklahoma City Thunder, who averaged 23 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists this previous year. Shea is a special talent in this league. Defensively, I always thought that, he could be better than what he's shown, given his height, given his length, right around 6'4", doesn't weigh the most, but just how slithery, he moves on the court. I always felt he could be a much better defender than what he's shown. And, maybe if OKC, once they start competing, maybe he'll look much better on that end of the floor. But I'd say he's right around average, slightly above average as a defender, which doesn't sound as good as, what Jaylen Brown is. But, when you take into account what Shea GilAlexander does on the offensive side of the floor, similar to pretty much everybody I've named, this is like a broken record. He's improved vastly as a 3-point shooter, not necessarily at the same volume as those other guys, as he only takes right around 5 threes per game, but hits them at a damn near 42% clip, which is amazing. And you take into account again the difficulty of threes that he's taking, and really that he's the only person on the court for OKC that defenses have to worry about. That's extremely impressive. He's always been a very great free throw shooter, and he is the best slashing and guard, and the best scoring guard around the rim. So that gives him a major plus, and he's taking great strides as a playmaker. And not especially in pick and roll situations, I feel like he's gotten much better at finding the roll men, and feeding his teammates that are spacing the floor for him. And just in general, Shea Gilgeous is just a special talent. I think he's improved vastly as a mid-range scorer as well. And, he's the best scoring guard at the rim. Aside him and maybe like two other guys are in that same boat. But I think Shea is a special talent. Despite not being a great defender in pretty much any situation, I think he is a pretty solid, help defender. On ball, I do think he struggles a little bit sometimes. And I think in pick and roll, sometimes he can get caught up, like trapped in between the defender and his man. But overall, Shea Gilgeous is a pretty average to right above average defender. But offensively is really where he shines. His efficiency as a 3-point scorer, despite the volume not really being there, is very impressive. His free throw shooting, his ability to get to the rim is the best in the league amongst guards. His scoring at the league is the best amongst guards, and he's an improved mid-range shooter and improved playmaker. And similar to Jaylen Brown, having him at number 7 really does pain me, as those are two of my favorite guys, non-Knicks in the NBA. But that just shows you again how deep this position really is. Coming in at number 6, I have Donovan Mitchell, the shooting guard for the Utah Jazz, who averaged 26 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists per game this previous year. This one really pained me. But comparing him to the next 3 guys, I didn't know. It's splitting hairs between him and these next 3 guys, and it was very hard to rank these 3, Donovan Mitchell and the guys that I have at 5 and 4. But we could start off. Offensively, Donovan Mitchell is 3-way scorer, was the number 1 option for a contending team. The number 1 seed in the West. And his counting stats speak for themselves. He's improved as a playmaker, even though I do think he tends to be a black hole on offense when Utah's not going, they kind of just rely on Donovan Mitchell ISO ball. But he's improved vastly as a 3-point scorer. Shooting right around 38% on damn near 9 attempts per game. That's very good. He's not as good of a mid-range scorer as you might think. I think he's a solid finisher, not as good as a mid-range scorer as you might think. And he's always been a pretty solid free throw shooter. He's always had the knack of getting to the line, and he's an improved playmaker in all situations in terms of pick and roll reads, swinging the ball, finding his right teammates off attacking the basket, and he has he has pretty good synergy with Rudy Gobert. So his offensive prowess doesn't need to be stated. Defensively, I do think he's a poor impact defender. I think despite the athleticism and the stature, he's right around 6 feet, but given how strong and fast he is. I think he lacks discipline on the defensive side of the floor. I think he gambles a lot. And I don't think his IQ has always been there on the defensive end. I think just effort too, right? Because you got to keep in mind how much he has to do offensively for Utah. But it's so hard to rank Donovan Mitchell for me, right? Because you look at these counting stats, and even when you watch the games, you're like, okay, like he's a very good player, but I don't believe Donovan Mitchell is like that number 1 tier of player, per se. But then you watch the playoffs, and his numbers just explode, and he kills it in the playoffs. But you also have to keep in mind that Mike Conley was out for a good amount of playoff games this previous season. So the stats, while they do look good, if the team was fully healthy, I don't think they would have looked as good. But you got to give him his props for taking that baggage. And Mike Conley left him, and still providing for his team. But again, I do think in those situations, instead of being much more of a playmaker, which the team desperately needs, he resorts to just really getting his. The offense tends to become stagnant. But I still, Donovan Mitchell is Donovan Mitchell, and he's an all-star caliber player, borderline all NBA caliber player, and I think the stats are great, but when you watch the games, especially more so regular season games, he doesn't look as impressive as the stats might say. And I know that's very taboo, not a very popular opinion. But still, I have Donovan Mitchell coming in at number 6. Awesome scorer, number one option for the number one seed in the West, and is a pretty mediocre defender, but still his offensive prowess speaks for itself, and he's a borderline All NBA caliber player. Coming in at number 5, I have Bradley Beal, the shooting guard for the Washington Wizards, who averaged 31 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists per game this previous year. And Bradley Beal and Donovan Mitchell, it's I get why a lot of people would have Donovan Mitchell over Bradley Beal and the guy that I have at 4, but just got to keep in mind that what Bradley Beal is doing, and just with the significant less help than Donovan Mitchell has on his roster, is just, I think it just speaks for itself. And I think when you just watch Bradley Beal compared to Donovan Mitchell, I think Bradley Beal is just a better player. When you take it, I think Donovan Mitchell is even though the numbers might say Donovan Mitchell is a better 3-point shooter, and especially when he explodes in the playoffs, when you watch Bradley Beal, I think his 3-point prowess is overshadowed by his efficiency, and that's just due to the sheer amount of, he doesn't take any spot open threes. He takes all contested hand, like right in his face, much heavily contested threes, and very difficult shots as well, which I can't really blame him due to him being the only high level scorer on that Washington team. I think, in my opinion, I don't think the difference between Bradley Beal and Donovan Mitchell as 3-point scorers is that great. But in terms of finishing around the basket, and Donovan Bradley Beal is just on another level. I put Bradley Beal and Shea GilAlexander and another guy at the point guard spot in the conversation for the best scorers at the basket. Bradley Beal, despite being only right around 6'3", 6'3", closer to 6'2", in my opinion, when you watch him, it's just his wingspan and his core strength is just so great that he could just push through even big men and finish around the basket. His efficiency as a free throw shooter, one of the best guys at getting to the line, and he doesn't have to do all that crap that James Harden or Trae Young does, and he still gets to the line right around damn near eight attempts per game at the line, and he hits them at damn near a 90% clip. So he's just worlds better of a finisher around the basket as a mid-range scorer than Donovan Mitchell. And I think the difference between the two, as a 3-point scorer is definitely overstated by the percentages, due to again, Bradley Beal, the sheer level of difficulty of shots that he's taking from behind the arc. And then, as a playmaker, I think it's pretty much a wash. But Bradley Beal being able to average 4 assists with the level of talent that he has around him, I think is pretty impressive. But I do think Donovan Mitchell is a slightly better playmaker than Bradley Beal. But again, that's a wash. And defensively, I think Bradley Beal is a better defender than Donovan Mitchell. Again, he has similar issues to like a Terry Rozier that we previously mentioned. I think he has a lack of focus on that end. Lack of discipline. I think that's just due to the players around him and him not being really in a win environment. But given his wingspan and his sneaky athleticism, he can make plays, and I think he does have his massive potential as a help defender. And he can, give some guards problems defensively, on ball, again, due to that wingspan and, how quick he is and how strong he is. So I think Bradley Beal is a better defender than Donovan Mitchell. And while it's not necessarily shown now just because of, again, the situation that he's in, I still think he's a better defender nonetheless. And, just how much better of a finisher and a mid-range scorer than he is compared to Donovan Mitchell, I think, definitely puts him over the top, despite what Donovan Mitchell does, again, in the playoffs. But Bradley Beal is a supreme offensive talent in this league, and having him at number 5 again, it just hurts. But I think even though it's super close between him and Donovan Mitchell, I have to give the edge to Bradley Beal again, just because of his mid-range scoring, his finishing around the basket. I think he's a better defender. I think the 3-point scoring is a bit of a wash. And, even though Donovan Mitchell does what he does in the playoffs, you have to keep in mind, he's playing with Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley and Joe Ingles and Bogdan Bogdanovic, while Bradley Beal had to play with Russell Westbrook this previous season. So I have Bradley Beal coming in at number 5. Coming in at number 4, I have Zach Lavine, the shooting guard for the Chicago Bulls, who averaged 27 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. Zach Lavine, another one. I think him, Donovan Mitchell, and Bradley Beal all in the same tier player. It's like splitting hairs, but when you take into account, I think Zach Lavine is just a better player than Donovan Mitchell. Again, I know a lot of people are going to have a problem with Donovan Mitchell being at number 6 and these two guys being ahead of him, but I think Zach Lavine is just a better player. And when you just take into account the production that he had, offensively this previous season, and just at that efficiency, it's just insane. Let's just put this into perspective. Zach Lavine shot 8 threes per game this previous year at a 41% clip. He took 11 two-point shots this previous year and hit them at a 57% clip. That is insane. He had a 63 true shooting percent average. He had 63% true shooting. Donovan Mitchell had 56. That's insane. That difference is insane. Even when you want to take into account their Donovan Mitchell's playoff jump, he still was only at a 60% true shooting. That's insane. Like, I think Zach Lavine is just a better 3-point shooter than Donovan Mitchell. I think he's a better finisher at the basket than Donovan Mitchell. He's a better mid-range scorer than Donovan Mitchell. His free throw shooting can get better. He did take right around 5 attempts, so he was getting to the line, hit it at about an 85% clip. So it's very good, but not like a Bradley Beal, for example. But it's Zach Lavine's efficiency, his production and efficiency on the offensive end, just being a superstar 3-level scorer offensively this previous season is just insane. It's mind-boggling. That those numbers are mind-boggling, and that efficiency is what really puts him over Donovan Mitchell than me. And when you just watch the games, I think Zach Lavine is just a better player than Donovan Mitchell. And him and Bradley Beal, I think, I spent a day, debating the Donovan Mitchell, Bradley Beal and Zach Lavine, just because of similar situations. But I think even though Bradley Beal might be a better finisher at the rim and mid-range scorer than Zach Lavine, the numbers certainly say otherwise, and I think Zach Lavine is right there with him. I don't think the difference is all that great where, it's that much of a plus for Bradley Beal. But the 3-point scoring, is just on another level. Zach Lavine took, more 3-point attempts than Bradley Beal, and you can he took more contested, harder 3-point shots, as at the same rate as Bradley Beal did, and took more and hit them at world's better hit them at a world's better rate, shooting again right around 8 threes per game and hitting them at a 41% clip. That's just insane. And having a 63% true shooting percentage while doing all of this is just insane. He's gotten much better as a playmaker. He had the chemistry was continuing to develop, with alongside Nikola Vucevic before he got COVID last season. And, being able to do this all with the teammates that he had around him. I think he had a significantly worse cast than, Bradley Beal had, or we don't even have to mention Donovan Mitchell. So for him to match those guys and even, eclipse those guys in production with a significantly worse roster, being the only player on his team that the defense has to worry about, is the reason why I have him over those two guys. And, despite his defensive concerns, which, he's improved, but he's still, not a good defender. I think he's definitely the worst defender of the three, even though I think him and Donovan Mitchell's slightly better defender than Zach Lavine. But, even though he is the worst defender of the three, his offensive production and efficiency is just insane, to the point where, I just couldn't convince myself of putting those other two guys ahead of Zach Lavine. So Zach Lavine comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, I have Devin Booker, the shooting guard for the Phoenix Suns, who averaged 25 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. Not much needs to be stated about Devin Booker. Despite being a pretty mediocre defender, the past 3 guys have all been, at the very best mediocre defenders as well. So, defensively, not much to talk about. But offensively, Devin Booker is one of the best mid-range scorers in the league. I put him in the same tier as Bradley Beal, and DeMar DeRozan, as we stated in our previous video. I put him in the same tier as those guys. Devin Booker is just another level of scorer in the mid-range with his touch, his poise, how deep of a bag he has, the way he gets to his spots at will. Devin Booker is the man. And I think he's gotten better as a finisher around the basket, but his real value comes in his mid-range scoring. I don't think he's necessarily as good of a finisher around the rim as Bradley Beal or Zach Lavine, but his mid-range scoring is just so good that I think he's just Devin Booker. And despite the 3-point percentage and attempts not being as good as Zach Lavine, You have to keep in mind the level of difficulty of 3 pointers that he was taking, and the fact that he was playing with Chris Paul, a player with two completely different play styles, and he had to learn how to get his and when to get his. So and all of his 3 point attempts were pretty much contested as well. He didn't really like to take catch and shoot threes, and he didn't really have the luxury of doing that. As despite all the talent on that Phoenix Suns roster, Devin Booker is still Devin Booker. People weren't going to help off of Devin Booker, despite the situation. So, he was always, had a very tough offensive assignment, in terms of, having defenses harass him, most of the times having their best perimeter defender on him. He still got done what he had to get done. And, he shot damn near 60% true shooting percentage, even with, shooting 34% from three. So that just shows you how good of a scorer Devin Booker is. And, I don't think the gap between Devin Booker and, Zach Lavine is that far. I think, again, similar to the other guys, I think it was, like splitting hairs. You could definitely say, if you were to make the argument that Zach Lavine is better than than Devin Booker, I would definitely listen to you. You could definitely convince me of that, but I think, just his prowess as a mid-range scorer, and he's gotten better at finishing at the basket. He's always been a good free throw shooter, always known how to draw fouls. His improved playmaking as well. He's despite in the playoffs, where the Suns devolved into just Booker ball, and he didn't really focus on getting his teammates involved. You have to give him some slack for that, because that's just been his play style all year. And CP3 really took charge of the floor general duties. So you have to give Devin Booker some slack for that. But again, Devin Booker is Devin Booker. Despite being a mediocre defender, what he does on the offensive end is just special. And while you could definitely argue with me that Zach Lavine is better than Devin Booker, I'd definitely listen to you. And if you were to have Zach Lavine over Devin Booker, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. I have Devin Booker coming in at number 3. Coming in at number 2, I have Paul George, the shooting guard for the Los Angeles Clippers, who averaged 23 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists per game this previous season. Defensively, Paul George has definitely seen better days, but I still think he's still right below an all-defensive caliber of player. He's always been good as a help defender, being 6'9" with that long wingspan and how quick he is, being able to jump passes and help off weak side. But his value has always come in on his on-ball defense, and while he's not nearly as fast as he used to be, or as explosive, I think he's. Don't get me wrong, Paul George is still Paul George, but I think he has decreased slightly in those areas. To the point where he's no longer, a clear all defensive caliber of talent, but with all the plethora of shooting guard and small forward, a talent defensively, I'd have him right around a borderline all defensive caliber of talent. But Paul George is still Paul George, and then on the offensive side of the floor, what needs to be stated, Paul George took right around damn near 8 threes per game and hit them at a 41% clip, and he's always been a very solid mid-range shooter, and his finishing at the rim can be a little inconsistent, but because Paul George likes to do a lot of up and unders instead of just going through and finishing through contact, which when he does, he does it easily because he is so talented. But his strength as a mid-range shooter, as a 3-point shooter, is doesn't really need to be stated. While he is frustrating in terms of finish, he is frustrating when he does, try to do up and unders around the basket instead of just finishing through contact. He's still Paul George. He's still a good mid-range scorer. He's still a good, inside scorer. He's a 3-level scorer. He's improved vastly as a playmaker this season. As again, similar to Kawhi, what I said about Kawhi, when LA doesn't really have a point guard or a floor general, him and Kawhi have kind of taken up ball handling duties, and he's gotten much better in pick and roll, swinging the ball, hitting the open man, attacking and hitting the open man, similar to how much better Kawhi has gotten. And he's always been a solid rebounder. And Paul George, despite not having the overwhelming production of some of those other guys like a Bradley Beal or a Zach Lavine or Devin Booker, it's just he's just Paul George. He's just so worlds better of a defender than those guys, and the offensive burden that he has, and I think he makes his teammates much better. He's a similar, while the counting stats and the defensive metrics might view him and Jaylen Brown similarly, or just the eye test defensively, I think Paul George does a much better job of making his teammates better than Jaylen Brown. I think that was on display in the regular season, not only when Kawhi was out, but when both of them were on the floor, and as well as, in the playoffs as well, where, his gravity, and I think he did a much better job of, when Reggie Jackson was going, or, Terrence Mann, he did a very good job of, recognizing that they were on and getting them the ball, and, not being selfish. So again, Paul George, as great as the other guys that I previously listed are, Paul George is just Paul George. Is on another level, again, being a borderline all defensive caliber of talent at this point in his career, and being one of the best offensive scorers in the league that we have today. So Paul George comes in at number 2. And finally, coming in at number 1, I have Kyrie Irving, the shooting guard for the Brooklyn Nets, who averaged 27 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists per game this previous year. Now, as a quick disclaimer, him and James Harden did swap positions, as while it's not necessarily official, and when you look at Basketball Reference or different sites, it might have Kyrie as a point guard. He's come out and stated that he's taken over the shooting guard duties, and James Harden has really moved to point guard. So they've swapped positions. So in my point guard rankings, in my next video, I will have James Harden, as a point guard, and Kyrie Irving, will be a shooting guard. But regardless, even if he did switch the positions, I think Kyrie would be number 1 on shooting guard list, and James Harden would still be number 1 on the shooting guard list. I still view Kyrie Irving as a shooting guard again, and given the fact that they're going to stay together for what seems like a while now, Kyrie Irving is going to be the shooting guard for the Brooklyn Nets. And, one needs to be stated about Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is just a different level of talent than the guys that we've stated before. He's just a superstar. Kyrie Irving is a superstar, offensive superstar. He's Uncle Drew, right? He's got the best handles in NBA history. His ability to be a 3-level scorer, he took right around 7 threes per game, hit around a 40% clip, which is just incredible. And, given that way that he was hitting those shots, he's one of the best mid-range scorers in the NBA. Again, I put him in a conversation with him, D-Book, DeMar DeRozan. I put them all in the same conversation. It's just, and his finishing around the basket at his height is just insane. With that layup package that he has, with all the finishing abilities all the finishing, the ways that he can finish around the basket with both hands is just, a thing of beauty. It's something to watch. And he's always been a great 3-point shooter. While he doesn't necessarily take as many as Bradley Beal per se, he does take around 4 per game and hits them at a 92% clip. He had a 50-40-90 season, and that's super impressive in of itself. But when you take into account how difficult Kyrie Irving gets his shots, right? It's not like Devin Booker, where Devin Booker does. Devin Booker has a bag too, but Devin Booker usually it's not all that many moves, right? Kyrie Irving is doing all these moves, exerting all this energy, and he's still as efficient as he is. He's just a special talent, and he's improved vastly as a playmaker. And while that's not really, all that prevalent in his game anymore due to, again, James Harden coming onto the team, he's Kyrie Irving is just, he's Kyrie Irving. And, there's not much that needs to be stated defensively. I think all of these guys, except for, Paul George and Jaylen Brown, are pretty at best. And I think Kyrie Irving has become an average defender. And, him and Paul George was very hard for me. But, just given Kyrie's just efficiency and just prowess on the offensive end, I think I value it more than, what Paul George offers as a two-way player. So, Kyrie Irving comes in at number 1. Not much needs to be stated. It's Kyrie Irving. And, as a quick disclaimer, I will have James Harden in my point guards list. And even if you did want to label Kyrie Irving as a point guard and James Harden as a shooting guard, James Harden would obviously still be number 1. So at the end of the day, Kyrie Irving comes in at number 1 for me. And that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, if you enjoy my content. And if you are subscribed, please share it with a friend. My next video is going to be about my top 10 point guards. That'll be the final video in this series. So stay on the lookout for that. And besides that, guys, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Please take care. Have a blessed day. Peace.